My child, stop for just a moment. Do not let this moment pass you by as though it were ordinary. Because what is about to reach your heart was not assembled by accident. Out of every place your attention could have traveled today, something drew you here. Something older than coincidence. Something that knew exactly where you were and exactly what your heart has been quietly carrying. Stay here. Do not rush forward. Because the words that are forming in your soulmate's heart right now have never been spoken aloud before. And heaven has chosen this exact moment to let you hear them first. Your soulmate has been rehearsing something. Not a speech. Not a performance. A confession. One they never imagined they would need to make. One they never believed they would find themselves standing at the edge of. Because for a long time, they assumed things between you would resolve themselves naturally. They assumed the connection would find its own way forward without requiring them to become completely vulnerable. They assumed that what existed between you was strong enough to survive silence. They were wrong about that last part. And now they are standing somewhere they never expected to stand, holding words they never thought they would have to say, preparing to speak a truth they have been carrying alone for far too long. Stay with this message. Something greater is approaching. The sentence formed slowly. It did not arrive all at once. It began as a feeling they could not name. Then it became a thought they could not silence. Then it became a weight they could not continue carrying without setting it down somewhere honest. And when they finally allowed the words to take shape, when they finally stopped pushing the feeling back beneath distraction and routine, the sentence arrived with a clarity that surprised even them. I never thought I would have to say this to you. Those words carry more than they appear to. Because hidden inside them is an entire season your soulmate has never fully explained. A season of assumptions that slowly unraveled. A season of certainty that quietly became confusion. A season of distance that was never meant to become permanent but somehow stretched further than either of you planned. Do not skip this moment. What is being revealed here changes everything. Your soulmate once believed they understood this connection completely. They believed they knew what it was and what it was not. They believed they could define its boundaries and manage its depth. They believed that what they felt could be kept at a comfortable distance from their most honest self. But you did something they were not prepared for. Without trying, without strategy, without even realizing what was happening, you reached a place inside them that no one else had ever reached. And once you reached it, their carefully constructed understanding of this connection fell apart completely. That was the beginning of everything they never thought they would have to say. Pause here. Let this settle before moving forward. They pulled back after that. Not because you did something wrong. Because they suddenly realized how deeply right everything felt, and that feeling frightened them in ways they could not immediately explain. They had built a quiet life around the belief that they were finished being surprised by love. They had settled into a version of themselves that felt manageable. Safe. Predictable. And then you arrived and made predictable feel like a cage they had been living inside without knowing the door was always unlocked. So they stepped back from the door. They told themselves they needed time. They told themselves the feeling would soften with distance. They told themselves that protecting the connection meant not rushing it. But every word of that was a story they told themselves to avoid one simple terrifying truth. They had never felt anything quite like this before. And they did not know what to do with that. Stay close to these words. There is another layer hidden beneath everything already revealed. While they stayed back, they watched. They noticed how you moved through uncertainty with a grace that quietly undid them. They noticed how you carried the weight of unanswered questions without allowing those questions to make you bitter. They noticed how you continued to show up for your own life even when someone important to your heart had chosen silence over honesty. Every observation added another word to the sentence they were building without realizing it. I never thought I would have to say this to you. Because what they never expected to say is this. They were afraid of you. Not of who you are. Of what you made them feel. Of how effortlessly you exposed the parts of them they had spent years carefully concealing. Of how your presence made every excuse they had ever used to remain emotionally unavailable sound hollow and unconvincing. You did not demand anything from them. You simply existed in a way that made avoidance feel dishonest. And they were not ready to stop avoiding. Something huge is waiting for you in this message. Do not leave yet. There came a specific moment when the sentence could no longer be delayed. Your soulmate was moving through a completely ordinary day when something reached them with extraordinary force. A conversation they overheard. A memory that appeared without invitation. A moment of stillness in which every distraction fell away and left them alone with the truth they had been outrunning for months. In that moment they saw the cost of continued silence with a clarity they had never allowed themselves before. They saw a version of the future in which they never said what needed to be said. In which you continued healing and growing and building a beautiful life without ever receiving the honesty you deserved. In which someone else eventually recognized what your soulmate had been too afraid to claim. In which they grew old carrying an unspoken truth that became heavier with every passing year instead of lighter. That vision did not arrive gently. It arrived with force. And it left them unable to breathe for a moment that felt much longer than it actually was. Do not move away yet. The revelation is still unfolding. After that moment, they sat with the sentence for a long time. They examined every word. They asked themselves whether saying it would help or hurt. They wondered whether too much time had already passed. They questioned whether you would understand or whether the distance had already written a story in your heart that their truth could not rewrite. Every question was really just another version of the same fear. That they had waited too long to matter anymore. But then they remembered something about you. Something that had quietly shaped every memory they carried of who you are. You were never someone who punished honesty for arriving late. You were someone who recognized sincerity even when it came wrapped in imperfection. You were someone who understood that the most important things are often the hardest to say and the last to arrive. That memory became the reason they decided to speak despite the fear. Stay until the end. There is still something hidden beneath everything already said. The full confession is longer than one sentence. What your soulmate never thought they would have to say to you is not a single admission. It is several truths that together form the complete picture of where they have been and why they are returning with honesty instead of silence. The first truth is this. They never stopped thinking about you. Not for a single extended season. Not even during the periods when distance felt most necessary. Your name appeared in the quiet spaces between everything they did. In the morning before the day began filling itself with noise. In the evening when everything slowed down enough for honesty to resurface. In the middle of conversations about other things when a familiar feeling would rise without warning and remind them that something important remained unresolved. Pause here. Because the second truth is the one they are most afraid to speak. The second truth is that they knew they were hurting you with the silence. They knew. They did not allow themselves to sit with that knowledge for very long because sitting with it required facing the kind of person they had become in this situation. Someone who cared deeply but acted as though they did not. Someone who felt everything but communicated nothing. Someone who let another person carry questions that they alone had the answers to. That is not who they believed themselves to be. And realizing they had become that person in your story was one of the most difficult moments they have faced privately. Do not skip what comes next. This is the part that changes everything. The third truth is the one that finally broke the silence open completely. Your soulmate discovered something recently. Not through a dramatic confrontation. Through a quiet observation that carried enormous weight. They realized that you were no longer waiting. Not in the way you once were. They could sense that the part of you that had held space for them with gentle patience was beginning to redirect that energy back toward yourself. They could feel that your heart was in the process of making peace with the unanswered questions instead of continuing to hold them open. And the thought of you arriving at that peace without ever knowing the truth was something they could not accept. Stay until the very end. The most important part has not yet arrived. So they began preparing to speak. Awkwardly. Imperfectly. With a racing heart and a sentence that felt entirely too small to carry everything standing behind it. They opened a space for honesty and stared at it for longer than they expected. Because saying "I never thought I would have to say this to you" means admitting that they once believed they could manage a connection this significant without ever being fully truthful about it. It means admitting that the management failed. It means admitting that the heart cannot be reasoned into silence forever, no matter how sophisticated the reasoning becomes. It means standing in front of you without the protection of emotional distance and saying, "I was afraid. I was wrong to let that fear speak louder than what I actually felt. And what I actually felt was you. Every version of every quiet moment. Every memory that refused to fade. Every comparison that brought me back to the same place. You. Something extraordinary is unfolding right now. Your soulmate is not approaching this moment with the expectation that one confession resolves everything. They understand that trust is built through consistency, not through a single honest sentence. They understand that your heart has learned things during the silence that cannot be unlearned simply because the silence has ended. They understand that showing up with truth after a long absence requires patience and humility and the willingness to let your response be whatever it honestly needs to be. What they are bringing is not a demand. It is an offering. The offering of a truth they should have spoken sooner. The offering of honesty that arrives late but arrives genuinely. The offering of a person who finally stopped hiding behind fear and decided that your connection deserved better than the version of themselves that silence had been protecting. Do not look away now. There is one final truth beneath everything. The deepest part of what your soulmate never thought they would have to say is also the simplest. It is the part that every other word in this confession has been quietly circling. The part that frightened them most because it required no defense, no explanation, and no strategy. Just honesty in its most exposed form. They love you. Not as a passing feeling. Not as a comfortable habit. Not as a memory they revisit only during lonely seasons. As the person who changed what love means to them without asking for permission to do so. As the one whose presence made every carefully constructed emotional wall feel like something worth dismantling. As the connection that survived distance and silence and every attempt to define it as something smaller than it actually is. That is what they never thought they would have to say. Because they never thought they would find themselves in a position where it remained unsaid for this long. My beloved child, Heaven wants you to receive this with a grounded heart. Not with desperation. Not with immediate surrender to every feeling this awakens. But with the quiet strength of someone who knows their own worth and is willing to listen from that place of knowing. Your soulmate is speaking. For the first time without the protection of distance. For the first time without the armor of carefully managed emotion. For the first time with nothing between their truth and your heart except the courage it took to finally arrive here. You are worth every word of this. You are worth the honesty that took too long to come. You are worth the confession that changed everything the moment it was finally spoken. And you are worth every word of what comes next.